before this special episode of Thingamajigs, I should say that it may negatively affect those who are presently full of Christmas spirit. That is to say, it will be covering the history of a prominent Christmas figure, and it may not be what they expect. You know what I mean, right? Just make sure the people listening to this aren't going to be devastated by, hypothetically, a dead Santa whose body was taken apart and scattered to the ends of the earth. Hypothetically. Okay? And don't forget to have fun. And then that was the most bland cat food I had ever tasted. Well, hello and welcome to the Thingamajigs Christmas Spectacular.
I thought it was an extravaganza.
It is the Thingamajigs Spectacular Extravaganza Special.
This is starting to sound like one of those titles from ye olden times.
It's the Thingamajigs Spectacular Extravaganza TV Special.
I think it would be a radio special if we're gonna compare.
It's the Thingamajigs Spectacular Extravaganza Radio Show Special.
This is a podcast. The modern radio show.
Why are you trying to kill my vibe over here? Bringing the Christmas vibes. We're here to talk about the exciting history of mundane things, and I am one of your hosts, Ben.
And I am Danielle. Actually, I want to be someone else for Christmas podcast extravaganza.
You mean the Thingamajigs Spectacular Extravaganza Radio Show Special?
Yes. I am Mrs. Claus.
And I am Sprite Boy.
Yes, it is that happy time of year when we venture out to, believe it or not, the mall to find those special gifts.
The what?
The mall.
I don't even know what that is.
I know, that's because there's not very many left. Our town at home got rid of their mall a while ago, but there is one here in Logan, I believe there's one. It's getting shut down here very soon, unfortunately. But our mall was replaced with a street mall, I guess you'd call it. It's like a section of land that has a bunch of individual stores, and it's all connected on a street, and you can walk around, and it's usually very festive this time of year.
Whenever you describe it, I feel like the picture in most people's head is just like a strip mall, but it's not quite it. It's kind of like a grid. It's got little streets that connect them all. It's very cute.
Mm-hmm. It's very geared towards walking. So like they have streets that you can drive down it, but it's very pedestrian-minded, the way that they set it up. But we're not there, so we'll have to go and find the all-in-one, under-one-roof mall that they have here in town.
We could be the last people to ever buy Christmas presents at a mall. Probably not, but we could be.
Did I ever tell you about how I got my ears pierced in the mall? I got my ears pierced at a kiosk at the mall. That was fun.
Was it like a kiosk meant for that, or was it just like a guy selling perfume and he was like, hey, I could pierce those bad boys you got?
Well, I was 6, so I don't exactly know, but there was like this chair that was very tall, or maybe it wasn't, I don't know, I was 6. And I got to pick out my earrings. One thing that I will say about this guy that did it, the earrings that I chose were like a needle on the back. And I've noticed that the ones that they have at Claire's, they just have these guns that push a regular earring through. So at least I had that going for me.
Ugh. Awful.
I don't understand why anybody takes their children or gets their ears done themselves at Claire's. Why are people not going? People need to be going to tattoo parlors to get this done. They tattoo and body piercing are professionals. They know what they're doing. They have the proper equipment. Everything is clean.
It's because places with tattoos are scary.
You know what else is scary? Tetanus.
Is it? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't know.
I mean, I've never had tetanus, but
I've had a lot of tetanus shots.
Well, good for you. We did our Christmas shopping 4 days before Christmas. So, wow. We are going to really be in the hustle and bustle of the season. It's going to be like that movie Jingle All the Way. You know, the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger? And he goes on Christmas Eve to try and find this Turbo Man doll.
Classic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he was in a regular mall, too, because it was 1996.
And that's when malls were still, like, a cool place to hang out. Good times. I used to feel like such a cool kid when I'd go to the mall and just hang out. I was not a very cool kid, so had to take those opportunities where I could find them.
We do have our wrapping paper ready to go. We each pick a paper to wrap our presents in for each other so that we don't have to write names.
It's a good system.
It works. I think it's a great idea for parents who have a lot of kids. They all pick their own wrapping paper. And you'll just know this paper is for you. Also, they only get to pick one roll of wrapping paper. So once that wrapping paper is out, that's as many gifts as you get.
Probably takes away some of the magic of Santa.
Oh, that's true. My family didn't do Santa. I didn't grow up with Santa as a figure.
We only did Santa for a few years. I think until I was probably 5.
I mean, obviously I knew about Santa. I watched all the movies and stuff. It just wasn't... The magic of Santa was not in my house.
I was careful to not spoil it for my little cousins and such.
That is such a big deal. What I mainly remember about Santa growing up is how much my mother told me that you could not talk about Santa to other kids because you would ruin it for them. So it's made me wonder if I'm going to do Santa with my kids just so that I don't have to instill in them so harshly that you cannot tell other kids that Santa doesn't exist.
See, that wasn't a rule given by my parents. I was just trying to be nice. They didn't care.
So if you haven't guessed yet, we're going to talk about Santa. Who's that guy? Where did he come from? Why does he seem to have elvish slave labor? Are they voluntary? Do they have debt to the Keebler elves, and Santa's workshop is like where you work that debt off? These are all questions we will not be answering.
It is well known that Keebler is a subsidiary of Santa Claus Incorporated.
Oh, is it well known?
Well, yeah. It was even in the 2003 hit film Elf.
Oh, I thought that they talked about how there was only like 3 jobs that elves could do. It was like make cookies and make toys, and what was the other one?
Yeah, and it's all at the North Pole.
Lots of trees at the North Pole, huh?
Yeah, it's in the movie. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, we will be answering where Santa is from. The North Pole, of course. That one's easy. Or is it? It depends on which Santa you're talking about. If you're talking about pop culture Santa, then yeah, North Pole is right. But if you're talking deeper, the real man that our caricature version is based on, then we will journey to the modern day Turkey, but in 280 AD.
Well, it's not really modern day, is it?
But it wasn't called Turkey back then. I'm just giving the people a sense of geographical position.
That's when it was still called Goose.
Nicholas was a wealthy man. He inherited money from his parents. I couldn't figure out where his parents got money, so we'll just have to be happy with knowing where he got the money, his parents.
Mafia. Mysterious income. It's always mafia.
I think they just didn't do a good job of recording it.
Neither did Al Capone, and that's what got him busted.
So his parents died in an epidemic. I couldn't figure out how old he was when his parents died. Everything just said young. Young is a relative, so I don't know. But he was born into a wealthy Christian family. So we don't actually know a lot about his life because the earliest writings about his life were written centuries after he died, and that leads to exaggerations. Some of these stories are probably true, but the details might be off, especially the ones where he does phantasmical things. That's probably not a real word, but you know what I mean.
Quit speaking non-gibberance on my podcast.
I've decided to make phantasmical a word. You knew what I meant. It said that his uncle possibly ordained him as a priest. Some accounts called him a bishop, some called him a monk. He was some kind of man of God. But he was well known for his generosity, so that is what he decided to do with his money. He gave it to the needy, usually anonymously, which is probably also why it's hard to find any concrete evidence of these stories.
Chump. Who gives their money anonymously? What an idiot.
The most well-known story is when he found these 3 sisters who were poor and their father couldn't afford their dowry, which in that time meant that they would likely end up as sex workers, and not the kind of sex worker who chooses that profession. It's not like this was a solid plan B for them. This would have been a horrible plight forced upon them. But the most interesting version of this story has Nicholas tossing a bag of gold down their chimney and that bag of gold landing in the sock of one of the girls. I think this is one of the references we have for why we do Christmas stockings.
I hate it when I get up in the morning, slip my socks on, put my shoes on, and I stand up and there's a piece of gold in there.
Oh yeah, it's just the worst, isn't it?
Happens all the time. It's always after you tie your shoes, so you gotta do the whole thing over again. Ugh.
You didn't notice that there was a piece of gold in your sock before tying your shoe?
Well, sometimes if it's a whole bag of gold that somebody dropped down the chimney, then you can feel it, but, if it's just like some golden coins and artifacts. Got a lot of calluses.
So this meant that the oldest girl could then get married. He did this 2 more times, and this led to their father sitting by the fire at night waiting to discover who had given them the money. And when he found out who it was, Nicholas begged him not to reveal his identity.
He did a terrible job keeping that secret, didn't he? Dude immediately went blabbing about it.
I think he did do a terrible job, because another thing that was said was anytime something wonderful happened that they couldn't explain, it must have been Nicholas. These stories are going to get harder to believe as we go on. Like, it's said that when he was an infant, he only nursed 2 days a week and fasted the other 5. What a weird thing to lie about. I guess they wanted to instill how selfless he was, even as a baby, but even Jesus wasn't claimed to have fasted as a baby, so I think their standards were a little high. Another story has him appearing on a ship to some sailors who were caught in a bad storm. Nicholas is said to have calmed the water. That one was probably based on Jesus.
Yeah, I feel like that one's even weirder because they stole a story from Jesus and gave it to Santa Claus.
Another story is him bringing 3 children back to life who had been murdered by a butcher. They were cut up and pickled to sell as meat. I think it was supposed to be passed off as pork. Even in legend, we don't support cannibalism. He also supposedly slapped some dude in the face at some kind of meeting.
These kids allegedly were chopped up and pickled.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought them back to life.
Yes.
What kind of life did they lead as pickle kids?
I said that the stories were going to get harder to believe as we went on.
It's just a bunch of little kid pickle cubes hopping around.
I have to assume
Thanks, Santy.
I have to assume that they were put back together, and they didn't just live as autonomous cubes.
Pickle kids. Some assembly required.
He died on December 6th, 343. He was made a saint by Pope Eugene IV in 1446, and he is known as the Saint of Children and Sailors, probably because of the stories that I just told you. So he was buried in Turkey, but his remains were stolen in 1087 by some Italians, and they brought them to Italy. This increased his popularity in Europe, and it encouraged pilgrimages to this area. Churches around the world have acquired fragments of these remains, and in 2017, a piece of his hip bone was dated to the 4th century. Of course, we can't be sure that these are the remains of St. Nicholas, but at least we know that whoever they have would have been alive around the same time as him.
Why does everybody want a piece of old St. Nick so bad? Why did they steal his body and then spread it across the earth? I don't understand.
Oh my gosh, what if people started doing like communion? This is Jesus's blood and this is Jesus's body, except for it's like communion to Santa. That's what milk and cookies, see, like, how we do wine and crackers or grape juice and crackers? Santa communion is cookies and milk.
I see. So we've been doing milk and cookies totally wrong all these years.
So St. Nicholas did have a period of time where he wasn't so popular. It wasn't just St. Nicholas. It was all the saints. You'll remember the Protestant Reformation. Well, with that came the idea that we shouldn't venerate saints. Basically, Martin Luther killed Santa for a minute. There was some exceptions, though. Northern Europeans were huge fans, especially in Holland, where the legend of Sinterklaas persisted. December 6th became a day for giving children gifts, and people would dress up like Santa Claus, meaning they would put on red bishop costumes. Legends started where Santa Claus could go through locked doors or down chimneys to place gifts in shoes or stockings.
Have we considered that he's just a really determined foot fetishist?
I'm gonna go with no.
We'll just keep it on the record, just in case.
This lore around Santa Claus grew to involve more characters. Ones who would punish naughty children. Depending on what part of Europe you were in would determine what kind of threat you received. If you were a bad kid, you could be eaten or kidnapped and thrown in a sack and taken to the Black Forest. Or if you were a naughty kid from the Netherlands, they threatened to take you back to Spain. The horrible place of Spain. Or you could get just a good old-fashioned rod beating. At least now you just get put on a list and given coal, which is useful. You can use coal for all kinds of things. But this is where we get the anti-Santa Claus, or Krampus. This character has other names too, like Rue Claus, or Belschnickel. That one's just fun to say.
Also, Krampus, good movie, and Belschnickel, good bit from The Office.
It's really weird how all of this stuff evolves. We can see it slowly morphing into what it is today, with the red bishop costume and the naughty children versus nice children. But the Protestants were very intent on moving away from all of this. They wanted to focus more on the baby Jesus and have him be the center of gift giving. But this episode is about Santa Claus, so we're gonna leave the nativity for another time. What's funny is they went with Christ Child, or Christkind, or Kris Kringle, which just evolved into another name for St. Nicholas, so that backfired.
Santa Claus is like an amorphous blob that absorbs everything. He can't be stopped. They tried to take away his power and he just absorbed it.
Sinterklaas made its way to America through the Dutch, immigrating and taking all of this tradition with them. But it got Americanized. His name was changed to what we know now as Santa Claus. The English-speaking portion of the country adopted and combined the kind old man narrative and the Nordic folk tale of rewarding good children and punishing bad children to make Santa Claus. So by the late 1700s, St. Nicholas was pretty well recognized in American culture. I think we all know exactly who you're talking about when we say St. Nicholas.
Hey there, it's me, Ben, again. I will be here to provide fun Christmas facts and anecdotes along our journey.
Is this your Christmas voice?
Yes, it's very soothing. You have to picture me sitting next to a fireplace with a glass of eggnog.
Like a smoking jacket?
Yes.
All right, I'll allow it.
The first of our heartwarming tales comes from the year 1914 in the fierce battlefronts of World War I. You might not dare imagine that such a scene could be imbued with any Christmas spirit, but you'd be mistaken. During the events now referred to as the Christmas Truce of 1914, the opposing British and German forces, who had been fighting in Belgium and France, were unable to gain ground from one another and were reaching a stalemate in the months leading to Christmas. At this point, everyone realized that what they needed was a little Christmas spirit. The Pope began petitioning the military powers to lay down their weapons for Christmas. There was much back and forth and trouble getting everyone to agree, but eventually they accepted the Christmas truce. According to letters sent back from soldiers in the field, while some continued trying to pick off their opposition, many agreed to embrace the spirit of the season. Reportedly, the British, French, and German soldiers left their trenches and joined one another in merriment, sharing songs, wine, cigarettes, and cigars, playing soccer, and taking photos. In the late hours of Christmas Eve night, the opposing troops got together to sing a touching rendition of God Save the King. The German soldiers were described as, quote, a good-looking lot, only wishing for peace, in a manly way, end quote. How German. On Christmas morning, it would seem, some of the British troops were perhaps feeling too much empathy and urged the Germans to stay in their trenches and, quote, play the game and pretend to fight, end quote. Even firing warning shots when the Germans tried to continue the holiday festivities with them. Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
There's some interesting stuff about Christmas in the 18th and 19th century. Christmas was a time of drunken men and the working class letting loose and causing havoc for the upper class. And that all got reinvented to have Christmas more about children. And all of a sudden they had this revelation that children and childhood is precious. And making Christmas special for them became a priority. But this episode is about the history of Santa, not the history of Christmas. I suppose if this podcast lasts that long, we could get into all of that in the coming years. There's lots of topics that I really thought about to do, like history of Christmas trees was one that I threw around, but if we landed on Santa. The 1820s is when we really see the Santa Claus that we know being firmly shaped. This was due to a couple of things coming together. One being the booklet, The Children's Friend. Well, actually it was called The Children's Friend, a New Year's present to little ones from 5 to 12.
So specific.
I know, it's like they wanted to give every title was not only the title, but it was a title and a description all in one.
It reminds me of search engine optimization. It's like they were practicing for it and they didn't even know.
Yeah, it's just another great example of how they really could have shortened those things. I really love this running trope we have. Thank you, ye olden times, for the great comedic content. So this booklet was one of the earliest known visual representations of what we would call modern Santa. It was an old man. You know how old men make wonderful friends for children. And he had a sleigh and also a very important box to check off for spotting Santa. He had one reindeer attached to that sled. In the early days, Santa could only afford one reindeer. You know what it costs to house and feed a whole reindeer, much less 8?
Oh my, don't I. So I did the math based on some numbers that I actually got from reindeer owners. Firstly, it would cost about $1,500 per reindeer. The good news is that if you're buying your feed in bulk, it should only cost about $1 a day to feed them. You'll also want to add some sugar beet to help their digestion and provide ample nutrients, which will add another daily $1. Oh, and you'll want to give them some moss every few months, which is about $30. And you'll want to do stool samples every few months to make sure they're healthy and free of worms, so that'll be another $30. Of course, all this assumes you have a nice pen already set up for the reindeer. You're going to want a tall fence, 4 to 6 feet high, and since you just shipped a reindeer across the ocean into a strange environment, I'd go with 6 feet in case he gets a little jumpy. Most farmers would probably say that Santa can get away with 1 acre of land for his 8 reindeer, 9, of course, if you include Rudolph. Given the weather conditions and size of reindeer, I'd recommend a nice sturdy fence, so that'll set him back at least another $3,000. But I have some really bad news for Santa. Halter-broken reindeer don't sell often, so they won't even be close to sleigh ready, let alone flying. So since they're not flying there, that means he's gonna have to pay a minimum of $2 per mile that he needs the reindeer transported. So even if Santa ordered the reindeer from the northernmost reindeer farm that I was able to find, it would cost somewhere between $6 and $12 million to get it shipped to the North Pole. Now back to the show.
Well, now that we're done with Ben's corner, where he corners you and tells you a bunch of things, let's get back to, the main show, my show. So this old children's friend man did come from the north, and his reindeer did fly. I guess because there were so few people on Earth back then, he didn't need as many reindeer, because he wouldn't have been delivering as many presents as he is now. Also, more people are having fewer children, so not only do we have more children, we have fewer children per house. I think that means he's stopping more. There's more people now, and he's stopping way more often, is the point.
That's why there's actually thousands of Santas delivering the presents, because he cloned himself in the late 80s. That's a widely believed fact.
Now, there was something published before.
The truth is out there, people.
It was called Knickerbocker's History of New York, and it featured a man based more off of St. Nicholas, but he wasn't a bishop necessarily, he was a Dutchman, and it wasn't even a book completely centered on Christmas. It was about the 50 years of Dutch rule in the 1600s, and it shouldn't be taken as a book of fact. What's funny is in 1809, New Yorkers were talking about some classified ads concerning where the Dutch historian Diedrich Knickerbocker was. They didn't know that this was an invented person by Mr. Irving, and he had placed these adverts himself. It would be like J.K. Rowling. Where did J.K. Rowling go? J.K. Rowling is missing because it was a pen name.
He wrote a book, and then he placed an ad, was like, hey, where did that guy go that wrote that book? And it was him.
Mm-hmm. Must have been some kind of marketing ploy.
Yeah, it's a weird publicity stunt, but I support it. It's very inventive.
It was a nonfiction humorous book. Obviously, this was not a man that took himself very seriously. Santa Claus got another boost in 1822 when Clement Clark Moore wrote A Visit from St. Nicholas, or better known to us as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And this is where we get that big, round, jolly description of Santa, and he now has a fleet of reindeer. He became more popular and could afford more.
I hope he didn't buy them. I hope he only bought 2 and just let nature take its course, because
I have to assume that Santa has a reindeer farm.
I sure hope so, for his bank account's sake.
Through this time, you can distinctly see him moving away from a Dutch bishop and into the Santa we know. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas is probably the historical landmark for Santa. That poem was a huge hit. Everyone loved it. We still love it. I think we all still love it. If you'd ask me when the birth of our Santa happened, I would say 'twas the night before Christmas is the timestamp.
Oh, you're still here. Right. Well, the next Christmas tale comes from 1966. Ms. Hartman of Texas sends a package of Christmas goodies to her sister in South Carolina. But on its journey, the label was destroyed. The postmaster who received the package knew he had a duty to the mail and a duty to Christmas. He opened the package, taking note of the newspaper that was used as packaging and the names signed on the Christmas card inside. He placed an ad for the same newspaper that was in the box, asking for help delivering the package, and included the names from the card. Ms. Hartman saw the ad in the paper and identified the package. The postmaster then personally delivered the package just in time to save Christmas. The end. Bye-bye now.
Thomas Nast was a very popular caricaturist from the 1800s. He's responsible for the Republican elephant and the Democratic donkey symbols, which I thought was very interesting. He also popularized the Uncle Sam figure. He seemed to be pretty partial to political illustrations because he also drew a Santa Claus in stars and stripes for the Union soldiers during the Civil War. Ulysses Grant was a general in the Civil War, and he gave credit to Nast that he did as much as any one man to preserve the Union and bring the war to an end.
Well, so Santa delivered a war victory for Christmas.
It was also Nast who started the whole Santa's workshop and it being in the North Pole ideas. Another thing that was happening in Santa's favor was sectioned off portions of the paper specifically for Christmas advertisements. They were trying to get this Christmas shopping idea in the minds of the people, and they used images of Santa. In 1841, parents took their children to Philadelphia to see a life-size Santa model. This led to stores thinking that they could entice more shoppers and get more business if they had live Santas. James Edgar gets the title for first live department store Santa in 1890.
James Edgar was pretty legendary. He owned his store there, and he would dress up in costumes all the time and just walk around the streets, making people smile. And he was also well known for his charity work. He'd pay for people's medical bills and stuff. He really
was Santa.
Yeah, he truly deserved the title.
Around this exact time, the Salvation Army was looking for ways to raise money for the meals that they gave to needy people. So they started dressing up unemployed men as Santa. This is when the iconic Salvation Army bell-ringing Santas that stand in front of Walmart started. Although I don't think they really dress up as Santa anymore. You're lucky if you get a red Santa hat. But they still ring the bell for the most part. They might only ring the bell when they get a donation. I don't really know. It's been a long time since I've seen one.
No, I think they just lazily wave their hand every once in a while and make a ding.
I think we decided as a nation that we don't trust the Salvation Army. Or was that the Red Cross? I don't know. It's a shame charities are so easy to corrupt.
Yeah, that would be the Salvation Army. They have had a lot of controversy. It's mostly because they've done a lot of active campaigning against LGBT rights. since I think the 80s. They actually tried to change their ways back in the early 2000s, but there was so much backlash from like the big churches and their early supporters. Yeah, they had to revert back to hating gay people. And because they're technically a church, they've been legally allowed to maintain like discriminatory hiring practices and behavior and stuff like that for a while. It seems like they have been slowly trying to ease away from that past. But for the most part, I think we're cool with the Red Cross. So
we need to talk about one more thing before we wrap this episode up. Coca-Cola.
Yum.
It's obvious now at the end of this journey that we've taken that Coca-Cola did not invent Santa, which is a question that came up in the Google search engine.
I've heard that rumor a lot. People are like, oh, Santa was just some guy, and then Coke turned him into a big red Coca-Cola colored suit wearing guy.
No, I think Santa was pretty well established before Coca-Cola got their hands on him. They've been advertising Christmassy ads since the 1920s, but in 1931, Santa was included and the company began advertising in popular magazines, and the company wanted to depict a wholesome Santa that was realistic, so they commissioned Hayden Sundblom to illustrate Santa, delivering toys and reading letters while enjoying a Coke, because, you know, that's Santa's favorite drink.
Nothing like an ice-cold Coca-Cola while you're in the ice-cold North Pole.
I feel like that doesn't go well with cookies, but whatever. One time he painted Santa without a wedding ring, and this led to a lot of letters asking what happened to Mrs. Claus. It's funny that people paid that close attention to these things.
They were going through a rough patch. Santa wasn't getting enough milk and cookies that year, if you know what I mean.
Okay, first of all, we both know that Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus don't do that. They're like Barbie and Ken down there. Nothing.
Where do you think all those elves are really coming from?
Obviously, like Willy Wonka, he went to a far-off land and found them and brought them back.
Oh, so elves are actually just Oompa Loompas. And
totally.
Mr. Wonka just came up with a better name for them.
It's probably where he got the elves from. Or is that where Wonka got the Oompa Loompas from?
There's probably one central island that is the native land of the Oompa Loompa elves.
Yes, but who had them first? Probably Santa.
Yeah, probably Santa.
So Willy Wonka went to Santa's workshop and bought some Oompa elves.
No, you know, he's a really eccentric, wild guy. I could see him just being pals with Santa, and he went up there to visit, and he saw the elves, and he was like, yo, where did you get those? And he was like, well, here's a map where I found their native land.
They're good at making toys. They're probably good at mixing chocolate.
Yep. And they don't like to be paid.
Well, they get paid in chocolate and toys. So Coke introduced some new characters in 1942. Sprite Boy appeared with Santa and Coke advertisements. He was an elf-looking person with white, swoopy hair, but it wasn't until the 1960s that the beverage Sprite was introduced, so I don't know what to make of that. It's interesting that we don't leave cookies and a bottle of Coke out for Santa, since he seems to love Coke so much. I guess if you already know you're on the naughty list, you could leave him a bottle of Pepsi.
I would do that. I dig Pepsi. Also, Pepsi should really capitalize on that ad campaign that we just gave them. But we do expect a check.
We could convert Santa to the Pepsi generation.
Gonna start running ads with him in a nice big blue coat.
Dude.
That check better have a lot of zeros.
Ben.
What?
Remember what you were doing?
Yeah, of course.
Someone had a little too much eggnog.
Then why is my glass empty if there's so much eggnog? Checkmate. Now, our last story comes from 1993 at a cold, lonely intersection in Claymont, Delaware. Father Christmas, or maybe Mother Nature, someone smiled upon this intersection as life began to grow forth from the hard concrete in the form of a giant weed. At some point, someone had the idea to decorate this weed in Christmas trimmings. The weed brought holiday joy to every driver it graced. After the local paper reported on what they now dubbed the Christmas weed, the Delaware Department of Transportation, perhaps embarrassed by what they perceived as a roadway management failure, removed the tree. Then came the War of the Weed. Not to be confused with the war on drugs. That's a different thing. The tree was replaced, then stolen, then replaced, and then stolen again, over and over again. In all, it's said that there were 8 total trees at this intersection, with the last given its own security detail hired by locals to protect it. The Christmas weed has become a yearly tradition in the town of Claymont, given its own ceremony, which includes the singing of its song of the same name, which was created by the locals. That's it. That's the story.
You know they also smoked some swig.
It's Delaware. They don't do that.
It took me a long time to figure out the I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus song. Because they don't ever say that it's the dad dressed up as Santa Claus, because that's what dads do sometimes. I was right there with the kid singing and thinking that mom was kissing Santa Claus.
How long are we talking? How old were you?
I don't know. Whenever I was first listening to the Christmas music. I remember someone had to explain it to me. Because I thought it was just a song about mom kissing Santa Claus. I didn't know that there was a subtext there of it being dad. How funny it was, because dad was dressed up in a Santa costume and she was kissing her husband.
That's great. I love that. That's a good story.
I was pretty young.
One time I thought I saw Santa Claus dropping off presents.
Was it your dad?
To this day, I don't know if it was my dad dropping off presents dressed like Santa Claus or if I totally dreamed that one night.
I'm sure we could ask your dad if he ever did that, and then you'd know.
Good point.
Your dad would remember.
I don't remember him ever owning a Santa costume or anything, so I don't.
I guess that depends on how much special eggnog he had that night.
My PSA is don't travel for Christmas. It's dumb. You'll be a lot happier if you don't.
I would think that Thanksgiving is more of a traveling holiday and Christmas is more of a stay-home holiday. In my mind, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's how it should be. Actually, if we could just eliminate all of the traveling holidays, that would be even better.
I think that's the only thing that makes sense for Thanksgiving and Christmas being so close together, is you spend one with family and you spend one at home. Why else would we have put 2 major holidays 1 month from each other? Easter's a pretty big deal, and that's not near Christmas or Thanksgiving.
I don't think most people think Easter's a big deal.
Easter was a huge deal in our house. Easter was like second Christmas, except for the presents weren't wrapped.
You got presents?
Oh my gosh. So we had 2 couches, right? It was me and my sister. And my sister had one couch that presents would get stacked up on and arranged to be cute. And then I got the other couch that had presents stacked up on and arranged to be cute. But they weren't wrapped because it was Easter. You don't wrap presents for Easter.
We got one basket and it had candy in it. And we weren't allowed to eat the candy until we got back from church.
You didn't get presents on Easter?
No one did. It's not a thing.
You got candy too, but we always got chocolate crosses. Did you ever get the chocolate cross?
I think my grandma might have given me one once.
Do you have any memorable Christmas presents, from your childhood? That's the thing that you remember most from Christmas?
I don't remember what all came from Christmas or birthdays or whatever.
Oh, I see.
I do remember one Christmas, so I guess I do have one, because there's one that I do remember specifically. Maybe my brother was just really proud of his new job that he got. He got me and my closest brother a couple of giant remote control cars, a Corvette and a Mustang GT, and they were pretty cool.
That's funny. Mine is also car related. One year, my parents must have had a really good year, because I woke up and there was this big thing next to the tree covered with a sheet. And I took the sheet off, and it was one of those Jeeps that children can get in and drive around.
Power wheels.
Yeah, that was a good year. I guess another PSA is, all you adults out there, don't forget to get your parents Christmas presents. They've spent many years making sure that you had a wonderful Christmas, and it is payback time.
The bill is due.
I took care of both my parents. They don't listen to this podcast, so I can tell them what it is. I got them my mom needed new makeup, so I got her an Ulta gift card, and I also got her a little sweater thing. And my dad, his paddle for his boat was the saddest thing I've ever seen. It's a wooden paddle that was split in half, but he put it back together and then wrapped it with twine. And so I got him a new paddle. and a new crabbing net.
This is the most important PSA of the episode. If you're gonna plug in a bunch of Christmas lights, make sure you're being safe about it. All those little shrimpy home extension cord things and like that, they do not have any kind of safety mechanisms on them. And if you plug too many Christmas lights into them, especially incandescent lights because they use a lot more power, those bad boys will light up like Christmas lights, but with more fire.
It's pretty and it heats your home.
Heats your home right to the ground. Make sure you're using a good outdoor rated thick gauge extension cord if you're plugging a bunch of lights in outside. Don't stick a bunch of little outlet expander things into each other. Electricity is dangerous. I guess that's the PSA. Electricity is dangerous, and if you try and put too much of it through too small of a tube, it will ignite. All we want for Christmas is to hear from you.
Let us know if you've watched any Christmas movies. What's your favorite Christmas movie?
And tell us your favorite Christmas present memories. You have any wild Christmas stories? Any crazy Christmas traditions?
If they're wild enough, we would tell the story on the next episode.
Also, do you get presents at Easter? I'm pretty sure no one does, but if you're out there, please chime in. Well, dear listener, we hope you enjoyed the Thingamajigs Spectacular Extravaganza radio show special, and this exciting history of a mundane thing. Don't forget to grab a goose and have a happy holiday. Thank you for listening.